Hey guys, in this video I want to talk about how you can avoid reloading during DPS. Whenever you do a manual reload in DPS, it is absolutely killing your damage because it's just downtime where you're doing absolutely nothing productive with your weapons. Fortunately, there are a ton of ways to get around having to reload, and we're going to be looking into all of those today. I do have to say that while Titans have less options than everybody else, they still have something and I think it might surprise you. So we'll go ahead and look at that now. So the first thing I want to talk about is also the most universal because it works on any class in the game. And this is the Strand Grapple Reloading setup. Basically, this setup is super simple and it can be added on top of an already existing Strand build that does something else. Basically, you just need to have the Thread of Ascent and the Thread of Generation. Thread of Ascent is absolutely insane by providing a free instant reload on any weapon in the game while it's in your hands as long as you pop your grenade. And the special thing about grapple grenades is that if you use it and then quickly cancel it, you get half of the charge back. So you're only losing half of the grenade, which makes it much faster to get the grenade back using Thread of Generation. And remember, Thread of Generation basically gives you back grenade energy based on the amount of damage you're dealing, and unlike the Starfire Protocol, which was based on the number of instances of damage, Thread of Generation is actually based on the amount of damage you're dealing as well. It is worth noting that there is a minimal amount of energy that damage can contribute, so doing a ton of instances of damage is still super effective, but you will get more value out of doing large chunks of damage as well. The Strand Reloading setup is most heavily associated with Strand Warlock, mainly because they have a super good super when it comes to doing weapon DPS. However, it really can be applied on anything, and I think it actually shines on Titan quite a bit if you're ever stuck on Titan for weapon DPS. Obviously, playing Warlock would just be technically more optimal for playing Strand, but Titan still has a lot of good neutral game, and it might have some things that you need during other encounters or something like that. There's plenty of reasons to play Titan, even if their weapon DPS is lacking. And I would honestly choose this over something like using Thunder Crash or the Pyrogale's Solar Super, just because increasing your weapon damage is generally adding much more DPS than just adding a damage super on top of mediocre weapon damage. In addition to giving you instant reloads, Thread of Ascent also has two very powerful benefits in increasing your handling and your reload speed. It increases the stat to almost just make it 100 as long as you have any sort of decent base stat on the weapon. And it also adds a scaler, which means it is faster than just having 100 handling anyway. While I did say that manual reloads are bad and you should avoid them all you can, sometimes you just want to be lazy or you just don't need that level of damage and you're going to do them sometimes. Thread of Ascent also helps with your manual reloads because you get the basically 100 reload stat and the scaler. The handling is also super good. Handling in general I think is super underrated in PvE, especially for weapon DPS. Every time you switch weapons, you've got some downtime, and if you can reduce that time with stuff like Thread of Ascent and Dexterity mods, it is absolutely worth it to increase your damage. So moving on from the grapple, the next thing I gotta talk about is the Rain of Fire. The Rain of Fire is absolutely insane. I've been saying it for a while. I truly believe the Rain of Fire is the best DPS exotic in the entire game right now when it comes to armor. Remember, like I've been saying, weapons overall are just much more powerful than supers when we do a direct comparison, especially if you're using something like Edge Transit, which is actually the highest burst damage legendary in the game right now, and it is only able to be beaten by a pre-popped Celestial Shot from Hunter. So just to put that in perspective, that means that you have popped the Golden Gun before the damage phase starts, and then you shot it as soon as the damage phase started without any downtime. That is the only super able to out DPS the Edge Transit. There are a few exotics like Parasite and Grand Overture that do out DPS the Edge Transit, however their sustained DPS falls off much harder, so I still think Edge Transit's generally just the better choice most of the time. But the point really is just that if you're using your weapons effectively and you're enhancing them to the max, they're going to be better than having a damage super at all. And this is obviously also on top of already being one of the most powerful subclasses in the game on Solar Warlock. There are a ton of different ways to incorporate Rain of Fire into a rotation, and they can literally make any weapons combination able to be a rotation because it reloads all 3 weapons in the game and has such a short cooldown of only 4 seconds. I actually remember at one point I was just messing around and I made a rotation using only blue weapons where I used a sniper and a rocket launcher, and I was basically just unloading their magazines and then doing a Rain of Fire reload and just cycling back and forth between them, and that was all it was. It's super easy, it became a rotation, and all I needed was Rain of Fire to make it work. Without Rain of Fire, it would have been completely worthless and there would have been just so much downtime reloading. If you make proper use of Rain of Fire, it will do absolutely amazing things to you, and I can't recommend it enough. If you do want to look into more details about Rain of Fire, I have a relatively old video I made about it, and I'll make sure I have that linked in the description down below. From this point forward, we're pretty much only going to be talking about Hunter. Hunter have a lot of different ways to get good reloads and other things for their DPS, so we have a couple of different things to talk about. To start things off, let's just look at the regular marksman's dodge. This is already pretty helpful just because it's basically a free reload at some point during damage. However, if you don't have anything to get the dodge back quickly, you'll basically only get to have one throughout a DPS phase. However, there are a couple of ways to add on to this and make it better. One of those options is Radiant Dance Machines. If you dodge while you're near an enemy, you can just sit there and dodge infinitely for a couple of seconds, and you can extend that timer by getting kills while the timer is active. So this is really good against bosses that have enemies that spawn near them, and you can have enemies near you that you can dodge near. That way you could start it, you shoot the boss with rockets or grenades, and that splash then kills the ads, and then you have a really long timer to just infinitely dodge and dump everything as quick as possible. This is most effective on rocket launchers because you basically would have to use it every single shot, and it definitely adds the most value to rockets for sure. However, it still is relatively useful on any other weapon you have to reload often, like Fourth Horseman or Cascade Point grenade launchers. Another choice would be the Sixth Coyote. If you combine this with the Solar Hunter Fragment, Ember of Singeing, then you can get dodges back really quickly and keep them constantly upticking throughout your damage, and as long as you have a rotation that is decently long, you can keep one weapon with instant reloads the entire way. It's not quite the same effect as Rain of Fire, but it's still pretty good, and most of your abilities apply Scorch as a Solar Hunter, so you can just toss a grenade or a knife every so often and keep Scorch ticking on the boss, and you will keep the super fast regen on your dodge. Another thing I think I forgot to mention is the Ember of Benevolence for Solar. This is something you can use with Solar with any of the other exotics relevant to your dodge, but basically if you apply either Cure, Restoration, or Radiant to your teammates, then you will get a really fast regen rate on your class ability. And you can actually multiply this with the Ember of Singeing, which will then give you 2 multiplicative increases to your dodge, and you get it back extremely quickly in these situations. There are a couple of ways to proc Ember of Benevolence. The first and foremost is actually using your melee. You can make it give you Radiant by using Ember of Torches, and that will give Radiant to all of your teammates as well. You could also use healing grenades and throw those at your teammates so that you can get another Benevolence proc, especially if you've already used up your knife and you're not using Gambler's Dodge, which would be the norm unless you're using Dragon's Shadow. I ended up not bringing up Dragon's Shadow with this one just because I think it's probably the least relevant, although it is still technically helpful. Basically, it adds a ton of handling and makes your dodge reload all 3 weapons and lets you use the Gambler's Dodge and still get the reload effect. So it definitely has a lot of applications, but they're like really advanced and specific at this point, so I didn't really go into them. Anyway, that's going to pretty much wrap it up for the video. Let me know in the comments if you think I missed any major reload techs, and any topics you want to see me cover in the future as well. Since you did make it to the end of the video, if you do like my content, make sure to subscribe so you can get notified whenever I release videos in the future. Also, as for right now, I get a notification on my phone every time somebody leaves a comment on a video of mine. So I read literally every single comment I get, and I react to most of them, so please leave a comment with your thoughts. I love to read them. Anyway, I hope to see you in the next one. Bye-bye.